I wanted to make this video just to try and help people out who walk out and try and start their car in the morning. It won't start and they don't know where to start. And I did a troubleshooting one earlier, but this maybe is a little more direct. They go out and their car won't start. And I see this all the time on Ford Bahm. They write in and say my car won't start. To begin with, we don't know if it won't start after cranking or the car won't even turn over with the starter. And it's two different things you got to chase. But if it turns over and it won't start, a lot of people start changing parts. And that just mixes up everything. If your car was running good yesterday or last week or even last month, and you go out to try and start it, the timing didn't magically change. The coil didn't magically go bad. The ignition switch is good. Everything's probably still good. You just have some dirty points or some minor thing. Maybe your points sometimes after you park your car at a motel and it cools down overnight, and you get up in the morning, it won't start. There's two things you can do that are quite easy. Loosen the gas cap, and if you hear a hiss, that was your problem. The gas cap's not vented. Sometimes that vent up there just plugs up for no reason. The other thing is you might have moisture on your points. So take a business card or a piece of cardboard and just pull it through your points, and that'll clean it off. You'll probably get some dark smudges on the card. But that would probably now, even the experts have trouble determining whether it's fuel or spark. As simple as this engine and system is, people come up and it takes a while to really make sure that it's spark or fuel. And in the case of a manifold leak, you really have a problem. I'll cover that in a little while. But don't start changing parts and suspecting big, terrible problems with your car. Just check it out. And an easy way to check fuel, give you a good indicator, is you try and start it with a little bit of choke, and then go out and stick your finger in the mouth of the carburetor and see if it's wet. If it's wet, then your carburetor is getting gas, and that clears a lot of the fuel system, and your carburetor is very likely okay. The other thing that can happen, that float can stick, and a tap on the bowl will fix that. If your horn toots, your lights work, the fuse is fine, and electrical power is getting into your system. If you have starting fluid, a little can of that spray, spray that in the carburetor while somebody tries to start it. If it starts, you very likely have an air intake leak. And that can be a loose manifold, a blown manifold gasket, or the thing I chase a lot is the flange between the carburetor and the intake manifold. Those two flanges have to be flat. If you hit them with a file, they ought to be shiny everywhere. Those things warp and they move around, and you can get an air leak in that between those two flanges that doesn't necessarily whistle, but the car will stop as you pull up to a stop sign, and that's mainly because you have an air leak, and the idle mixture can't take any more air than the settings are. So you introduce a little extra air, and that makes it lean. And when you stop, you start decelerating at the stop sign. The fuel moves forward in the bowl, and that lowers the fuel level just slightly in the jets. So you've made the car lean so it dies. So that's easy enough. You take the carburetor off, file the top until it's cleaned up, that is shiny everywhere, and do the same thing to the underside of the intake manifold using a flashlight and a mirror so you can see what you're doing, and then put a new gasket on and put it back. That's always a good thing to do, as is cleaning your plugs. Plugs get black and fuzzy. It's easy enough just to hit them with a little brush and scrape out the annulus, get the carbon out of there. On the intake manifold, a friend just had a problem in his car. He literally went out to try and start it and wouldn't start. And we got it started with fluid after we changed the carburetor. We thought sure it was the carburetor, and it wasn't. And then we put some starter fluid in it, and it fired up. Then it would die. If you kept high RPMs, it would keep running. So and then we did the trick of squirting starter fluid in there on between the manifold and the engine block, and the car liked that. So we knew we had a leak in the intake manifold gasket to the engine. So we got another gasket ready to put it on, and we found the bolts dead loose. We tightened those 4 bolts up at about 40 foot-pounds. The book says 45. I don't quite go that high. That's Les Andrews' book. And that fixed it. So we didn't put the new gasket on or anything. We just had a loose manifold bolts. The air leak in the manifold in that gasket is hard to find. We had a car running rough when our whole club was parked at the Dream Cruise, and we chased it for a while in front of everybody walking around looking at the cars, and we found it was the gasket, and we used starter fluid to find that, and we put a new gasket on down there on Woodward Avenue, and that fixed it. Now, to clear the spark system, to make sure, or a big indication that the spark is okay, what I use is a test light, and just a light bulb with 2 wires soldered to it and 2 alligator clips. And I ground one here and this one to the arm, the movable arm of the points. Now this point is also the red wire coming out of your coil, so you can just as easily put this up at the red wire on your coil. That's all the same circuit. The Model A ignition system is pretty simple. Power comes in the black wire at the coil, goes through the coil to the ignition switch, back down to in here, and that works its way up to the movable arm. And when the movable arm points close, that energizes the coil. When they open, it fires the coil. So you want to have power to this arm when the key is on. So I'm going to turn the key on, and we'll see if the light will light. So now the key is on, and I have power down here, but it's grounded, so the light is not on. When I open the points, that means that this circuit is not grounded, so I have 6 volts between the ground and that circuit. Then the points close, it energizes the coil, and when you open it, that fires the coil. So real simple, a simple test light, and I got just one to ground, one end to ground, the other end to here or the red wire at the coil, and then you open, or you do have to have your points closed, because so you have to rotate the engine a little bit, and I do that by putting it in 3rd gear and just rocking it till the points close, because with the points open, you can't ground that circuit, so the points have to close. That also tells you that you got good, you hear that snapping? But if you do this, and you have the light when you open the points, your ignition system is probably just fine. You can chase things like this, but that isn't going to go bad overnight. And one thing I do on my cars, I keep a test light. There's one end of it, there's the light bulb, and then it runs along here, and I've got it grounded to the radiator, and I just hook that up like that, and I always have a test light I can use. so I can check the ignition or whatnot, or take it off and check somebody else's car. Good thing to have. Not pretty, but it's up under the hood.